Lord. A good picture has to include consideration on the African traditional religion, because that was the religious context in which the people lived, from which they came, and it wasn't a religious void. It was a whole view on life. The people of this African traditional religion believed in God, one God, creator, from whom life comes. They also believed in spirits, good spirits and bad spirits. The good spirits to be offered offerings, begging for favors. The bad spirit were also offered a type of joyless sacrifices, begging them, please leave us alone. Normally, this God Supreme had no shrine. It was much like St. Paul, the unknown God, except that in this case they knew him. There were names in his honor. God gave, God gives. My father's name, which his father gave him, was Arinze Chukwu, which means Deo Gracias. If it had not been because of God, this or that would not have happened. I don't know what happened at the time my father was born, but his father must have had a good reason. It is from this context that the people came. So when Christianity came, particularly as preached by the Catholic missionaries, it was like dawn to people who were looking for the light at 4 o'clock in the morning. What they were looking for, without knowing exactly how to do it, Christianity came and told them, there is sacrifice, but it will not now be a goat or a sheep or even a young man. It is the Son of God who came down from heaven and showed us how to offer himself in sacramental form, in the form of bread and wine, which become his body and blood. There were other reasons why people would be converted at that time. Let us say the grown-up, the Idigo of Aguleri, king of the place, he must have seen in these white missionaries something to elevate his people. Not just association for prestige with a white man, but also the school. And those were the first beginnings of medical care for the people. So he must have seen all that. For a boy like Blessed Tansi, he was sent to school by his uncle, who was headmaster. Gradually through the school, he learned about Christianity. So the transition from one to the other was not something hurtful, not something rough. It was something under grace, smooth. As a boy, Michael Tansi was known for being diligent, hardworking, a good schoolboy, a good houseboy, the type we call boy. He was good, he worked hard, he was honest, he was obedient, he was chaste as a boy, and he was joyful. He was good at football. He did not go to Atlanta for World Cup, but he played as much as you could play at Aguilera. He prayed. There was once other boys were looking for him. They did not find him. Then they saw him finally in the church, in front of Blessed Sacrament, attentive, fixed, without moving, without looking backwards and forwards. He was praying. He was attentive to Jesus in the tabernacle. He was in union with God, even at that age. As a teacher, Father Tansi was known, that time Michael Tansi, school teacher, then headmaster. He was known to be dedicated. He looked for excellence. from the children in the school. He was teaching them by word and example. He lived a simple life. He was not rich. We are told that as headmaster, he came to school without shoes. But when inspector was coming, he ran quickly and got shoes. As a teacher, he trained the children in sports. Only the best was good for Michael Tansi. Rightly did Professor Elizabeth Isichei, writing his life, entitle it Entirely for God. Obviously, priests for me were distant figures, but I came nearer to him when my baptism was near. We had to go through the catechist, the station catechist at Ezewele, then the central parish catechist at Dunukofia, where he lived. Indeed, he was still building. He was living at Omonachi. That's when I first met him. And I saw him as a figure distant from me, small boy of 9, as a man of God, as one who celebrated the sacred mysteries. You could see that he believed in what he was celebrating. He was almost carried away to another world during Mass or Eucharistic benediction. We are influenced by other people. So divine providence uses other people to influence us. And there's nothing like a model in front of you. We were not given lectures about going to seminary, but Blessed Father Tansi was himself. His life was more powerful than a university lecture on the seminary. So, just by seeing this man, see him say Mass, hear him preach, go to confession to him, see him ride a bicycle, visit the sick from town to town, it was actual grace, definitely. So divine providence used it. Are we surprised that there are many priestly and religious vocations in the areas where he worked because of that type of man? As I would put it, unless you have fire, you cannot inspire. But if you have fire, then you can inspire. Anybody sitting near fire, there is no question of indifference. You will catch the heat. That was in 1945. Not just myself, because he had a boarding house for the boys who were doing the last 2 years of the elementary school, Standard 5 and Standard 6. They had to live in the boarding house from Sunday evening till Friday afternoon. They went home, went to farm with their parents on Saturday. Sunday evening they came back and they lived there. They cooked for themselves as best they could. He read to them spiritual reading every day after lunch from Dominic Savio, we remember that. Then he would ring the bell to get up, something like 5:15 in the morning. He would come where we were sleeping and say, "May Jesus Christ be praised," in Igbo. When we, school children in Umudioka, were needing mud for making blocks, we didn't have enough money for cement to have cement blocks. So we had blocks made of mud. And this mud was, you bring a lot of water and bring clay, you pour the water and you dance on the clay with the water so that the mud gets softer. And when it is strong and soft enough, it is put in molds. And that's how we made blocks. And with those blocks, the school was built. And of course, when he preached, he was like a flaming sword. No one could say I don't remember what he said. No, we remembered what he said. Some still remember some phrases from what he said because of the sincerity, clarity, also fire in his word. We did not know when he went to bed because he was awake when we went to bed and he was awake when we woke up in the morning. How much time then he spent at night in the chapel and how much time in bed, I don't know. But he was a man of prayer. Moreover, he was ascetical, the type that I would admire, but I would not imitate. He ate very little. His cook had not much work. But when he had visitors, he made them happy. He gave them nice things. He was not rich, but he was clean, tidy. We were not surprised in Dunukofia when he went to the monastery. Many people said, we knew something like that would happen because he prayed a lot. He was reading Dom Marmion, Christ, the Ideal of a Monk. I don't know how I knew, but I knew he was reading the book when he was in Dunukofia as parish priest. I went to look for books for my thesis. I was writing a doctoral thesis on sacrifice in Igbo traditional religion as an introduction to the Christian sacrifice. So I spent about 2 months in London. I made out time to go to Mount St. Bernard, and there I insisted I would serve his mass. In those days, concelebration was not the usual thing. So each monk, priest, said the mass in a small chapel, a small altar, and then side altar. And then there was the big community mass together where one person said mass. So I served his mass. And of course, I had opportunity to speak with him. They didn't talk to one another. They made signs, but they were allowed to talk to a visitor. I found him the same calm and peaceful person that we ever knew. Obviously, the monastery made him even more calm. The abbot sent me a telegram. In those days, there was no cell phone. So he sent me a telegram. Father Tansi has died. The burial is in 2 days' time. So I got some Nigerian students with me in London, a few more in Leicester, and we were there. We took a train and then a bus. So we made it. We reached about an hour before the funeral mass in the monastery. Obviously, it is like a person told, your father is dead. The person is a bit disoriented. My father is dead. My guide, the one I look up to. On the other hand, knowing that he was a very holy man, I didn't have much doubt where he would end up after death. I knew he would, if anybody would go to heaven, it has to be Father Tansi. He has to be there. So it was that mixture of sadness, desolation, and also Christian hope. So that it wasn't all tears the whole way. I knew his health was not the best. There was no coffin. It was a simple makeshift rafter in which the body was wrapped. I was struck by the radical poverty, simplicity of the burial, full of faith, but full of simplicity. The very opposite of extravagance.
Blessed Father Michael Tansi, pray for us. Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta, pray for us. Blessed Pope Pius the
Joy, peace, a dream fulfilled, as if it was not real, and it was real. I knew that the president of Nigeria had invited the Pope and the bishops of Nigeria. I was not indifferent to John Paul II, now Saint, deciding to make the sacrifice, and his health was not tip-top at that time, but he decided to do it. The Holy Father considered, if he did it in Rome, how many Nigerians could pay their way? If he did in Nigeria, he might get 1 or 2 million people, and so it was. The Pope was doing a great favor to our country. For me, it was also a great privilege to be included among those who accompanied the Holy Father. I was not hungry on that day, because there is a type of spiritual joy which suppresses natural feeling of hunger, like a priest on the day of his ordination. He is not worrying very much about what to eat or drink. There is the spirit which overpowers the body. Also, the significance in terms of history, that here was the vicar of Christ on the soil of Nigeria, declaring blessed a Nigerian citizen. It was also something shown by the whole nation, on the government side and also on the church side, obviously. The joy among the people, the enthusiasm, difficult to control, all that was part of the event. Going back to Rome, I felt almost like Simeon the prophet. Lord, you can now call me. I think that with my master in the headquarters, so declared, and God gave me the grace to live to see it, what else am I asking of the Lord? And this great help to our country, to Christians, that everyone is called to be holy, and it is possible. It is very eloquent. The impact, only God will finally understand it.
Blessed Tansi, Cardinal Tansi, Priest of the Lord in the Jesus time. You are a servant of Christ the Savior, fruitful branch of the
to see people so warm in devotion to him in Lagos, in Ibadan, in Cameroon, Yaoundé, in Manfe, but also in faraway United States of America. I was invited 1 or 2 years after that to Los Angeles when Cardinal Mahoney was still Archbishop. They were inaugurating a wall painting of him in one of the parishes there. Granted, most of the people there were Nigerians, but they also had local people. And it is very, very encouraging. In England too, there are groups who are devoted to this great man of God. All that helps us in our faith, that our faith is not a question of one village or the other. And holiness is attractive in itself. When Christ came into this world, he could not have come to every culture physically, but symbolically, he came to every creature, every people, every language, because he identified himself with humans in our nature. So he came for all of us. So following Christ encourages us. We are not in a village association. We are in a worldwide family, the new family of God, which is universal, which is Catholic, which is for all nations, cultures, languages, peoples, and times. What could be more encouraging than that?
Blessed Tansi, Blessed Tansi, model of virtue, exemplary priest, Blessed Tansi, holy Tansi, pray for Nigeria, pray for us all. Oh, blessed Tansi, my girl Tansi, priest of the Lord in Melchizedek's line. You are a servant, Christ the Savior, fruit to branch of the holy vine. Oh, blessed Tansi, Blessed Tansi, model of virtue, exemplary priest, oh, Father Tansi, holy Tansi, pray for Nigeria, pray for us all. You were obedient to the call of the Master, be meek and humble and show love to all. You live your life for the sick and the suffering to save their souls to the glory of God. Oh, blessed Tansi, Blessed Tansi, model of virtue, exemplary priest, oh, Father Tansi, holy Tansi, pray for Nigeria, pray for us all.
This brings us to an examination of what our Catholic faith teaches us about the call to holiness. Our faith teaches that everyone is called to holiness or the perfection of charity. Holiness means love of God and love of neighbor to a very high degree, at advanced level. The Second Vatican Council says that there is a universal call to holiness. That means everyone, without exception, is called to very high degree of love of God and love of neighbor. That means to very high degree of holiness. It is a mistake, it is an error to think that holiness is for priests and sisters and reverend brothers and monks. But as for us in the family, We just manage. If we manage and get into heaven, squeeze in, then we are all right. Mistake. This is not correct theology at all. It is an error. It is not true. Everyone is called to holiness. Holiness does not depend on your state of life. That means, if you ask now, who is the holiest person in this church now? If you say, it is according to high position, so it will be Cardinal, mistake. Error. If you say it is Reverend Father, we don't know. Reverend Sister, we don't know. The holiest person in this church may be a woman who has no seat even inside, who is outside now.